Right. The next item on the agenda is the Heritage Incentive Grant approval for the former St Luke's Vicarage, 185 Kilmore Street, Christchurch. It's been to the Social and Community Development Committee, so I'd invite Phil Clearwater to introduce this item.
Look, happy to introduce it, and I'm sure the staff will comment on it too and answer any questions. But it's clear in the report that in fact at the committee level this was a tied vote in terms of supporting the application. I just want to refer to the fact that at yesterday's committee meeting we had discussion around the review. We had a review of the fund and a discussion around the strategy. And while there are some aspects, including accessibility, which might impact on this application, in fact, it's essential that because the application was made under the existing criteria, that we deal with it that way, under the current criteria. So I just think it's important that we, in making our decision, keep that in mind. And perhaps questions. There was a question, I think, raised, Brendan, in relation to the funding table, just to clarify that. That was the only point of clarification, perhaps, that I needed. It was just the date of the funding table.
Yes, on the two tables, the summary of the financial implications, the first one is under point 6.7. It's just those last figures, the total available funds. The figure there is 2016-17. It should be 17-18.
There's a mistake. Yep.
So that's and that's obviously the same on table in 7.1. So apologies for that. That just
thank you.
Slipped through.
Sorry. I just want to focus on central government funding and different funding options rather than just looking at the funding option that's in front of us. My advice is that this particular building has applied for a grant from the Canterbury Earthquake Heritage Buildings Fund, but were unsuccessful as the fund decided to allocate all the remaining funds they had to one project only rather than to several separate projects. So that fund appears to be now exhausted. The second was the Equip Fund, Ministry of Culture and Heritage, but they're not eligible for funding from this fund as they're not on Council's earthquake prone building list, as this list only relates to commercial buildings. Is that right? Yep. And so the third fund is the Heritage New Zealand Poheri Taonga grant funding, which the owners applied to about the same time as they applied to us, and they've just been awarded $60,000 from HNZPT towards their project. So would that, given that they've only just been awarded that, would that impact on the recommendation that you're making to Council today?
No, because the funding that they're seeking from us is still relatively low percentage-wise of the works that they're actually doing. They're doing something in the order of $1.2 million worth of work. They didn't apply. Through discussions, they knew that they weren't going to be able to apply for 50% of that degree of funding. So they were quite selective as to what they put forward for funding. So the 200,000 approximately that we're supporting here is still much lower percentage-wise than a normal grant that we have the ability to fund up to 50%, but this is something like 26%.
But the granting, presumably you didn't know about the 60,000 being granted, but you knew that they were applying to other funds.
Yeah.
So it makes no difference to your recommendation.
No.
Okay. Other questions? Yanni?
If we were to reduce the grant to 100,000 in light of the other funding commitments we have the other funding pressures we have on the heritage grants, what would be the covenants that we could expect?
Well, yes, you would drop from a full covenant down to a limited covenant, so you would have to put a time limit on that. Usually it's around 20 years, somewhere between 10 and 20 years, whereas with a grant of over 150, you get a covenant that's in perpetuity.
Right. So in terms of the government funding, is there any requirements that you're aware of to have a covenant attached to that funding?
I'm not aware of any. Covenants are usually between the council and the owner. So I
Okay.
wouldn't have thought so, but I'm not sure.
So the minimum amount that we could expect a covenant would be 150?
Yes.
So
For a full
that's for a
covenant.
full covenant. There is a partial covenant that's time limited for any grant below 150,000.
And they are different covenants. The wording is not the same. A limited covenant is not as all-encompassing as a full covenant.
No, hang on, Mike.
Thank you. So if we were not to fund this project, what would happen to it? Would it continue and be completed, or would it fall over?
I actually don't think that we are qualified as staff to answer that question. It's a question for the owners.
So another question, because obviously this is a significant amount, 200,000. Once this property was completed, the works, and the owners or applicants received the grant, could they then just sell that property on without any comeback?
Yes, they can sell the property, but remember the covenant is in perpetuity, so it remains with the property. It isn't.
Yep.
It isn't. It's on the title.
I understand that, but it basically means technically they could sell that property for the money that it costs to do the full works, and potentially just put that $200,000 in their back pocket and walk away. Potentially. I'm not saying they will, but they potentially could do that.
But that's the same with any grant that you award. That we don't.
But this is a significant grant of $200,000.
Yes, but as we said, percentage-wise, they're investing 1.2 million.
Yeah, but it's $200,000 of ratepayers' money. So I'm just saying, potentially, they could do the work and then sell the property, and that $200,000 could go in their back pocket of ratepayers' money.
So if they've done the work, I think it's important. The advice that we would give you is that if they've done the work, the $200,000 of ratepayers' money has protected heritage, because the building will have been seismically strengthened. It will have had all of the upgrade that the funding that is provided for heritage protection is seeking.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just looking at how much money we're funding and the potential outcome of that for these people.
Phil?
I'm happy to move the staff recommendations. That's all. I wasn't sure there were other questions.
I have a question.
Yeah, well, we'll do questions first. Dion?
Sorry. As part of the grant that we're looking at giving them, what was it, the other stuff that they were talking about that they were looking to do to actually make sure that public are able to view the heritage fabric of this building? Was there other stuff that they were looking at doing, like helping make sure that the vision or the visual effect of the building is still being able to be seen by Kilmore Street or anything like that?
Yeah, if that's seen as a key issue, then there are means that you can use to preserve the visibility between the road and the building. So we could put items in the covenant. There is a portion of the covenant which allows you to put things in like that would allow protection of the visibility, and obviously that requires the agreement of the owner. It's a covenant is an agreement between two parties, so they would have to agree to that as well. Obviously they would have to weigh up the benefits of whatever restrictions there are in the covenant to the financial gains that they get from the grant.
We have done that before. I remember that in the Littleton building, that actually keeping the, from the roadside, that view was very much a part of the grant process.
Well, I mean, this is a beautiful building from Kilmore Street, and from a heritage perspective, it's a very important building for the city. And I'm just wondering if we can give a steer to that effect somehow. But I don't know the process to be able to do that.
So it would, you could be specific in an amendment to the recommendation. I would also note that staff have a clear understanding that this is something that the committee are seeking, and when we workshop any grant review process with the committee, we'll be exploring that as part of that workshop process.
Okay. So are we able to put something as an amendment into this to actually clearly stipulate that, I suppose, or ask staff to make sure that that's part of a condition to the covenant?
Yeah, you could add a resolution to say that you believe that the covenant should include some mechanism to preserve the visibility of the building from the road. So that could include, for example, obviously you don't want something like a big fence put up along the road boundary, or a big garage put in front of the building and the road.
Yeah. So are you okay with having...
We haven't got a mover and a seconder yet, so I'm going to move to that in a minute. But Mike, did you have another question?
No.
Okay. Any other questions? Pauline?
Just very quickly, just on 6.16 in the last bullet point, that the owners are committed to the continuing use and maintenance of the building. Is that a feeling that you have from these people, that they're actually committed to staying there? And yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, so
they fell in love with this building. I think they would have had to have taken it on, to be honest, because it's no small commitment that they have made.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
I've flagged forward, I'm happy to move it.
You'll move it?
And also happy to include the amendment that Dion is indicating.
You're happy to include that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And can I second it?
Okay, well, so can we request that the covenant include a mechanism for, so Phil Clearwater, Dion Swiggs, include a mechanism to preserve the visibility of the property from the street? Is that good enough wording for that?
I think Carolyn's requesting that that's a condition.
Yeah, I think, but yeah, instead of a mechanism, a condition. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Phil Clearwater, Dion Swiggs. Right, and now Yanni has an amendment.
Yeah.
So amendment number 1 is to reduce the the amendment is to reduce the heritage grant to, what is it?
150,000.
150,000.
Minimum required for full covenant.
So it's really just that we're amending the first line to, or the first amount to 150,000. So the rest would remain the same. Is that right?
Yep.
Yep. Is there a seconder for that amendment?
I'm not going to second it, but I would second it if he dropped it to 75,000.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Is there a seconder to reduce it to 150,000? That's going to fail for want of a seconder. Yeah. So, and you want to reduce it to 75? Do I have a seconder for that? No. Eh? Eh? No, we've been advised by staff that he can't. So that fails for want of a seconder. Should have done it pro forma, you know. Anyway. Yeah. So I'll open it up for debate. Phil, Dion, Glenn and Andrew.
So, councillors, when this came to the committee, I actually voted against the full $205,000. And they're the question, I guess, about accessibility, but also particularly, as Mike Davidson has referred to, that question of sort of private gain versus public benefit that was raised. However, I'm actually really clear to now support the full $205,000, and I think that having the additional recommendation there about visibility, that helps. Particularly why I'm changing my mind is that we've had discussion around community involvement with our heritage, and we received, a number of us on the committee received an email from the applicant, and I thought it was quite telling, and I'm not going to quote all of it at all, but there's some lines that I think are really significant. One is, they write, "We do feel a responsibility to make sure that any public funding we may get will have a return for others." And she also adds, "We're doing what we can to preserve the bits of history that the house tells, and we're keen to find ways to give back the support we may get through public funding." And I think it's with that kind of accountability, really, but also that, in fact, that there is a clear indication there that, in fact, the applicants are open to how, in fact, the community may really utilise what will be their home. That goes back to the original condition of the building or purpose of the building. It was a vicarage used by a family. It's held in high regard in terms of the heritage qualifications. It's a very strong historical history, both for Ngāi Tahu and for the church. So I'm now fully in support of the recommendations which I've moved.
Okay, Dion?
Excuse me. No, I'm very in favour of this, and the reason I'm in favour of this is when it first came to light about the decision and the owners emailed us all, I actually took it upon myself to go and actually meet with them and go on site and have a look at this building. It is absolutely amazing what they're having to do to keep the heritage fabric of this building, and for us to think that they're going to take public money and then on-sell that and make a profit out of it, it's just not possible, because the amount of money that they're needing to spend on top of what would normally be spent just to protect the heritage here is phenomenal. I mean, right now they've moved the whole building off-site and they're doing the foundations, but they have to have an archaeologist on there 24/7 when somebody's actually touching the ground, just because of the massive amount of significance this has to Ngāi Tahu and the site there. Kaharoa's been there to bless the site. They've been involved with the church to actually document the whole building as they're starting to rebuild it and stuff like that. The amount of energy that these people have to protecting this building and actually making sure that it survives through this earthquake and actually tells the story of early Christchurch, and even blending that into the native Christchurch story as well is really quite phenomenal, and I really appreciate what they've done to try and do this. So in that respect, I really, I would support this, and I'm really keen to see that, that the visual amenity is actually kept on site so that people can actually start to appreciate that building. I actually put it on my Facebook page when we were going to debate it 2 weeks ago. 100,000 people actually looked at that post that I put there. It's one of the most amazing things that's happened on my Facebook page. I've had dozens of messages from people who have either lived there or, lived there, some people were born in that building, and the stories that they were telling about the building itself and all those kind of things was awesome, and it was really cool to sort of see how just one building actually brought so many people to actually having a conversation about their memories of Christchurch and this, the happiness that actually sort of come from that. So I think it's actually a really good story, and actually I think we can incorporate it into the story of Christchurch. And actually it's one of those things, as we look back, we will have things that we're that will tell a story of what Christchurch has gone through and what it used to be. So I'm really supportive of this, and I hope people are supportive. I've got confidence that from meeting the people that they will do everything in their power to make sure this building lasts for another 150, 200 years.
Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you. I'm keen to see a public return for public money. So I stirred this up at the committee because I was pretty concerned over the substantial amount of public money going to what ostensibly looked like, a private setting. I take on the point made by Dion there over the visibility of the property, but I think that's only part of it. It's about the community openness and accessibility to it. Is it going to be part of a heritage trail? So I'm satisfied with the new information we've received. The owners have heard that what we've said at committee level, and on that basis I am happy to go with the recommendation today, having voted against it first at committee level.
Anne?
Thank you. Through the excellent engagement process with the heritage strategy that the team have done, The community clearly stated that it wanted to see heritage as a legacy and an inheritance that we have a duty to retain and protect it for future generations. So we are giving money to this project, not just for these people, but for this building actually, because these people may not always own this building. It may be sold on, and this building belongs to all of us. So we're putting money into making sure that this building that we own and we belong to and we have an investment is cared for and preserved for all of us. So very in favour of it.
Andrew, then Mike.
Thank you. I think we need to be careful that we don't confuse consideration of this particular grant application with consideration of what changes we might want to make to our heritage grants policy. And I'm certainly aware that there was some discussion, it's been referred to already at the committee, around the requirements of these grants, particularly around public access and public value from the spending of public money. And I certainly acknowledge the note that we've had from the owners of this building, which was referred to by Phil and others, around the realisation of public money and the will to make sure that there's as much public benefit from that as there can be on the part of these owners. But any consideration of what requirement for public access or public benefit there might be in line with these grants is something that would be more properly considered, and I'm sure it will be by the Committee on Good Staff Advice, as any changes to these grants and the way that we administer them are made. The building clearly is one that's got high heritage values, and the report makes it very clear that this is a building that certainly meets the criteria for this fund, and the environment in which we're working, of course, is one that the fund rules are what they are, and the application has been made under those rules. I believe that we're fortunate to have owners like the owners of this building who have got the commitment to preserving heritage, that have got the vision to preserve heritage, and in fact are willing to take the risks inherent in dealing with these kind of buildings, because this kind of project isn't something that's risk-free in anybody's language. The nature of these projects is that they're frustrating and they're long and they're arduous. So I think we're very fortunate to have owners that are willing to invest in these kind of buildings, and it's great that we're in a position as a council to be able to support those owners in caring for our heritage, in making sure that it's preserved for future generations, and certainly in this case, making sure that there is a good recognition of ways that they can bring about public good as a result of what I believe is good spending of public money, which after all has been set aside for this purpose.
Mike, then Yanni.
Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to correct Councillor Galloway, we do not own this property. It is a private residence and it was bought as is, where is. So they sort of knew what they were going to be getting into. And this is a large sum of money. And I just don't actually accept that this is the right thing to do. I understand that we created a pot of over $700,000 to go towards heritage, and I value the heritage in our city, and I know it does have a very strong place. The problem I see here is we already started this financial year behind the 8 ball by having to approve things last year to take away from that money. This is 28% of the funds for the year, and I already know that the Social and Community Development recommended another approval of $200,000 from this fund, another $200,000, 28%. We'll be going in shortly to October with only 19% left of that funding pot, just 19% with 9 months still to go. I think we need to look at the bigger picture. To me, we've got a problem with this policy and the way it is actually distributed without having a cap amount in there. And I know that it meets the criteria of the policy, but I'm not here just to rubber stamp stuff. I'll need to have a look at it and make sure it's going to work for the city and for the whole year. It is not going to work for the whole year. We've seen it time and time again when we're approving things this year for the next financial year because we just don't have the money. We need to be a little bit more smart of how we're doing this heritage. I was happy to approve this heritage grant if it was actually at a lower amount, so we can actually make this go out further throughout our communities to get more heritage value out there, because there is a lot more heritage projects out there, and there'll be a lot more people coming to the council for this fund, which will be soon empty because we're giving out $200,000 grants. $200,000 grants to private residences. I had to fight, claw over nails to get a small amount of money for a community facility that is going to put huge value into the community. Huge value. And that was a small amount. This is $200,000 of ratepayers' money that we're going to be giving to a private residence. I don't think that is acceptable, and I do not think that is right.
Yanni.
I share the concern with the quantum of funding, and I've read the heritage grants that exist from central government, and for Category 1 heritage buildings that are listed by Heritage New Zealand, which this one is, one of the few that, that will probably come in front of us, it does qualify for financial assistance. So I think the critical thing is to get the full covenant, because a limited covenant, obviously, for a time when you're spending a lot of money doesn't make a lot of sense. So I was happy to reduce the amount, which wasn't supported. So I can't support this quantum of funding. I have real concerns about the whole as-is whereas, where we seem to be picking up the costs that people incur because of this whole as-is whereas business that's going on in the city, particularly around our heritage. I just want to remind councillors that there's, even with a full covenant, there's no assurance that if we have another earthquake, that this building won't become as-is whereas again, and people will be back asking for money to fix it, and we won't have recovered anything. And this is what's actually happened in our city post-earthquake, where we've put heritage grants into buildings, they've been demolished or sold as-is whereas, and we haven't recuperated any of that money. So we do need to be cautious about the quantums that we're putting in. I do support heritage. I think it's really good that you've asked for the visibility from the street, because if you look at this, there's actually a huge amount of vacant land, but I just think that this grant is too much. It should be reduced in line of all the other priorities that we have. We've also got our own heritage buildings, so I love the fact that councils are passionate about heritage. We've put our own heritage buildings on hold because we don't have enough money to fix them, and yet we're giving out money, huge amounts of money, to private heritage building owners. So I do think we need to look at the strategy around heritage in our city. I welcome when that report comes to council. For this particular grant, I think this is too much and I won't support it.
I'll just say a couple of words. I'm supporting this. The amount that this building received from the Heritage New Zealand Fund, despite its Category 1 status, was $60,000. In terms of a $1.2 million contribution, it's not sufficiently significant in the advice that we've received, and I'm accepting that advice to reduce the amount of the Heritage Incentive Grant that we have before us. I just want to remind people that this site has Wahitapu registration. It has historical significance, obviously, for its 126-year association with the Vicars of St Luke's Church, and high cultural significance as a place sacred to Māori as the burial site of renowned Ngāi Tahu Chief Totahi. Now, I don't want to go into the fact that whether that was the correct name for Christchurch or Totahi, the place of Totahi, but that is what people refer to Christchurch as. This is a hugely significant site, and to think of a demolition occurring on this site is not something that I would want to stand by. The Vicarage has obviously the architectural significance as one of Robert Speechley's most highly regarded surviving domestic works, and of course, as the report says, the contextual significance is a picturesque mid-19th century dwelling that stands as a reminder of the loss of St Luke's Anglican Church after the earthquake. But the one that just came to mind is that the former vicarage was designed by Robert Speechley, the architect who came to Christchurch with his pupil William Crisp to oversee the construction of the Anglican Cathedral. I mean, in light of the decisions that are going to be made this weekend, I think this is a significant contribution to the heritage of our city, so I'll be supporting the recommendation. So on that note, I will put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. And that's Mike Davidson, Yanni Johansson. Thank you very much. That's carried.